You're listening to the Journey Podcast. What groundbreaking insights can science offer to those navigating the challenges of brain fog? Find out more in today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode, which is part of a special series from Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK. In this episode, we tackle the often misunderstood topic of brain fog. We unpack the science behind brain fog, exploring its causes, effects, and its connection to our overall mental health. Dr. Sabina Brennan is a chartered health psychologist, neuroscientist, and host of the Super Brain podcast. Her books, Beating Brain Fog and 100 Days to a Younger Brain, are both Irish Times No.1 bestsellers. Her new book, The Neuroscience of Manifesting, will be published on June 6, 2024. Sabina's mission to get everyone looking after their brain health as routinely as they brush their teeth has won her awards in recognition of the societal impact of her work and for her contribution to STEM communication, including Science Foundation Ireland's inaugural award for outstanding contribution to science communication and the Provost's Award in recognition of her contribution to innovation for societal impact. Her Super Brain podcast frequently makes the top 10 in podcast charts and has been featured by Apple as a new and noteworthy podcast. Dr. Brennan is a passionate advocate for brain health and a voice for the needs of individuals with neurological conditions. She represents Ireland on the Scientific and Medical Advisory Panel for Alzheimer's Disease International and volunteers on several committees and advisory boards. She has advised the Irish government and the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Longevity in the UK on brain health, dementia risk reduction, and healthy aging. Here is my interview with Dr. Sabina Brennan. Hi, Sabina. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because brain fog is such an important topic in today's world. I feel like it touches so many people. So thank you for coming on today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And for starters, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of your own story and where you're at and what you do?
Gosh, how long have you got? No, I'm joking, but gosh, where to begin? I'm a psychologist and a neuroscientist, and I'm really on a mission to get people thinking about their brain. I think it's kind of mad that our brain is our most important organ, and very few people know anything about it or how it works. Furthermore, like artificial intelligence, there's been hundreds of billions invested in it, and the aim of those endeavors are to try and simulate the human brain, but they do incredible things, but they simply can't duplicate the glorious magnificence of our brains. And each and every person listening, each and every person on the planet has this most amazing asset inside their skull, and most people don't give it a second thought. My mission really is to get people to brain health and to inform them about how their brain works. I'm aware we're chatting for Mental Health Awareness Week, and I feel that if you look after your brain health, your mental health, and your physical health naturally follows. So that's kind of my mission. So backtracking to how that became my mission, I'll kind of go in reverse. I left school at 16. I had finished school, but I had started school early. I didn't have the opportunity to go to university, and I went into a regular job, but a job actually I took to please my father. I was the youngest of 5. And his greatest ambition really was that somebody would work in the company he worked in, which was a large life assurance company. So I said, oh, I can do that. So I kind of worked in a job that, I'm not saying it wasn't a challenging job, but it wasn't a job that held huge interest for me, but it paid well and also had a lovely little bonus of a low interest mortgage. So it allowed you to get on the property ladder quite young, which I did quite young. And I married quite young and I had my kids quite young, relatively speaking. I suppose really after I had my kids, I kind of had this thought that I didn't want them to end up in a job like I did, that they were working to live. I really felt that I wanted them to find something that they loved and then find a way that someone would pay them for doing what they love. And then I kind of realized, well, kids learn by example, and I wasn't giving very good examples. So essentially, yeah, I took the plunge and I left my day job. I had studied drama like people study music. So I thought, well, one way I had always wanted to be an actor. There was voluntary redundancy on offer, so I took that. And the plan was that I would teach drama while I looked for work as an actor. And my parents were going to mind my kids. They were very young at the time, little more than babies, 1 and 3, maybe, I think. And on the very first day of what was to be the exciting rest of my life, my parents were in a car accident. They survived, but it was very traumatic. And they really just felt they weren't up to minding my kids. So suddenly then I found myself at home minding 2 children, which was never on my agenda. Anyway, eventually, yes, I did got work and worked as an actor. And I was in a soap 5 nights a week here in Ireland. And I absolutely loved that. And Ireland's a very small country when it comes to kind of acting. And I had a very, very high profile part in it and a very high profile exit from the show. And I was sort of told, look, well, you won't get work for a while. And I like to work. I thought maybe that I would maybe do a night course. And I became an actor really because I'm fascinated by the human condition. I have always been fascinated by it. I mainly although I trained for theatre, I mainly love film and TV, mainly because of, for me, the joy is in understanding why people behave that way and kind of getting inside the part that way rather than being on a stage and performing. So I thought I might do a night course in psychology. That evolved into, by pure chance, and I won't go into it because we'll never get to talk about brain fog if I do, but it evolved into me actually embarking on an undergraduate degree in psychology. Very scared at the time, because I hadn't been to university. And psychology in Ireland, we have a point system for getting into university, and medicine requires almost full points. Psychology is pretty much up there as well. For mature students, that doesn't count. You write an essay and then you get called for interview. You write an essay in an exam sort of context and then you get called for interview. So it's very different. So I got in and I thought that I would be totally intimidated by these really smart kids from school. And anyone listening, I don't know the profile of your audience, but anyone listening who's older and who's afraid of their ability and that would put them off further study, I'd say really honestly, you're way ahead of the posse than kids just out of school. You've navigated mortgages, you've navigated life. And really, if you pick something that you love doing and you follow the rules, you put the work in, it's actually really quite easy is what I would say. I found it easy and came first in my class every year and in my faculty because I absolutely loved what I was studying. That then led to, I got a scholarship to do a PhD in Trinity College in Dublin. And while I was doing my PhD, which has a crazy title, I must look it up again, but I think it was Electrophysiology and Neuropsychological Indices of Brain Changing with Age. Essentially, it was looking at the electrical activity in the brain and see how it changes on memory function and people as we age. But as I was there, when I was researching my PhD, I came across so much literature about, in the first instance, it was around how we can reduce our risk of developing dementia. And so much information about how we could keep our brain healthy. And this was in late 2000s. And some of this academic literature was going back to 1986. And I was just kind of going, hold on, how come I don't know this? How come everybody doesn't know this? And I really kind of was angry in a way and compelled by that anger and kind of felt a moral obligation to make that information public knowledge. I just felt it was wrong that all these academics had this information and there was huge areas of research going on and Joe Bloggs knew nothing about it. As soon as I finished my PhD, I don't know if listeners know, but generally speaking, certainly in Ireland, there are no longer kind of permanent faculty positions. Basically, you apply for funding to various bodies so that you can do research. And so I applied for funding, several funding opportunities, and actually got most of them, which was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, one of them was really sort of it was kind of interesting, really. And just if people are interested in how you can kind of make things work for you that mightn't seem obvious. And why this is relevant to mental health is because I think people should always follow their joy and things that they love. But basically, the European Commission they were looking for someone to do a project that highlighted the importance of the research that they do. And basically, I wrote a very cheeky proposal that said to them, nobody's going to be interested in an advertorial about brilliant work that you do. However, the European Commission has, as one of its key points of its agenda, to add 2 extra healthy years to our lives. And I said the best way to do that is to educate people about brain health and to reduce their risk of developing dementia. I said what I propose is developing a multi-platform brain health awareness program, which was website, animated films, an app. And I said, by way of that overtly will be an educational program for the general public, which will be freely available. But then when they click in to learn about why this is good for your health, they can click in and learn about the fabulous research that you are funding in this regard. So covertly, you'll achieve your goals. And they loved the idea and they did it. And that kind of really sparked more funding, more research to where I am today, really, which is, I suppose, an advocate for raising awareness of brain health and for empowering people to look after their own brain health along the way. Well, first of all, people aren't really aware of the importance of looking after their brain health. But secondly, somewhere along the way in our society, we abdicated responsibility for our health to our governments or to our national health systems. And that's kind of wrong in a way. It's wonderful that we have health systems that can support us if we become unwell. But I think the primary responsibility for our health is us. Nobody cares more about us than we do. I think being empowered to do what you can for your own health, be it physical, mental, or brain health, must be a first step that anyone takes. And then there will always be times where we need support. And I think if people took more responsibility for their own health, we would have far healthier health systems, because our health systems would then be dealing with issues that are not necessarily a consequence of lifestyle. And certainly I know in Ireland, 60% of all our beds are occupied by people who, and I'm not pointing a finger of blame, I don't mean it in that way. I'm as guilty as anyone of doing unhealthy things. But 60% of our beds are occupied by potentially preventable chronic illnesses. So, yeah, I mean, we're human. Basically, I transmit the information. I don't pass judgment. I follow my own advice sometimes I don't. That's the nature of the human condition. But I think unless you are aware and have the knowledge, it is unfair. And I suppose that's my driver, that there is knowledge out there that I think everybody should have. And then the choice after that is whether they actually take it on board. That's kind of, I suppose, my kind of career journey I don't know how long that took. You can edit it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so many amazing points that you touched on that are so relevant to our health, our mental health, our physical health, our overall well-being, and a bit also on the state that the world is in today, where, like you said, we've given away a lot of that advocacy that we should be doing ourselves. So coming back to that and giving information so that people can make informed choices about their health and how to keep themselves more healthy. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the cheeky proposal to the European Commission.
I was very naive.
Yeah, some of that information can be so boring when you just read it and so dry. I think that people learn much better when it's presented in a way that they can visualize it and understand it. So it makes a big impact.
Yeah, I also think, like, I just said to them, well, you want to tell people what you did. What are you giving them? Give them something that they need. Give them something that matters. And then your work has context and meaning, and relevance and empathy is something that I always kind of looked at. If you're telling a story, whether it was one of the animations we were making or presenting information, that for me is 2 key areas. You must make it relevant to your audience and you must induce empathy. In other words, it must matter to them. And that's something I think that's always kind of good to keep in mind when you're imparting information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people remember it much better as well when it applies to them and it makes sense to them.
People want to be entertained. They don't mind being educated, but we primarily want to be entertained. So if you can make something entertaining and there's an educational message in it, it's much more likely to stick.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we're going to try and do today. We're going to try and make brain fog entertaining so that our audience remembers what we're talking about and how that applies to them and why they should learn about that and how that shows up in their lives. So, yeah, we'll definitely do our very best to do that today. And so you've studied obviously a lot about the brain and you've done a lot of research and you've read a lot about that to be able to put this information out to individuals. Let's start with a very simple, basic question. What the heck is brain fog? What does that even mean?
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's important. I think it's a word that has come into general vocabulary since COVID because so many people have experienced brain fog post COVID. And it is one of the most debilitating symptoms that prevents people from kind of getting back to their work and to their lives. But I mean, I was writing this book, Beating Brain Fog, before COVID even existed. And I actually had to write it during lockdown, believe it or not. But brain fog has existed and been recognized for a longer period than that. It's really just a general term that describes a variety of symptoms. And the most common of those symptoms are issues with, if I just say a few phrases, if you've ever had brain fog, the following sort of would be familiar. I can't think straight. Oh gosh, I'm too tired to think. I can't concentrate. Gosh, I struggle to remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what I'm supposed to do today. I keep having to reread the same sentence over and over and over again. I can't work, can't get my job done because I can't tune out everybody else's conversations. My thinking feels really slow and sluggish. For me, when I've experienced brain fog, and I have, and I'll touch on that later, is for me, when I've had it, it's like my life becomes a game of charades because I can't find the right word or else I say the wrong word. And it's not just word finding, it's my language is not as fluid or as rich as it ordinarily would be. I'm losing a sense of humor and struggling even with small decisions like what to wear or what to pack for a business trip or what even to have for dinner. And actually, another one which people might be surprised as is bumping into things, spilling things, slamming doors, closing them too heavily, or tripping over things, what most people would call clumsiness. So essentially, every one of those sort of everyday experiences can map onto what we call cognitive domains. So, areas of our cognitive functioning. So, one of the key areas would be attention, difficulty sustaining your attention. That would be reading the same sentence over and over again and it not going in. Ability to focus and to tune out what other people are doing. And also, attention is related to concentration. When attention actually, it's a really high energy activity for your brain. To focus takes a lot of energy. Memory, that's forgetfulness, forgetting what you did. Also, working memory, which really is not quite a memory thing, but it falls under that term, working memory. And that's where, for example, if you were in the grocery store, you forgot your wallet, but you have some cash in your pocket and you have three items in your basket and you're kind of trying to hold them, add them up and do the maths to see whether you have enough money. That's working memory. You're manipulating information in your brain. Learning how to do new things. I often say I wish that there was another word for learning. And if any of your listeners ever find one, please do let me know, because I just think it's got so many connotations with school and with learning by rote and with learning academically that it's often forgotten about, that just navigating the world, going into a new building, opening a new door requires learning as far as your brain is concerned. It has to learn how to do that. It has to learn how much pressure to put on that door handle, etc. So everything most days involves learning, and that can be really compromised with brain fog. And for me, that sense would be if someone is trying to explain something to me, a process or whatever, I'm kind of go, no, I'm really sorry. It's just not going in. Just literally is not going in. I can't do this. Executive functions are sort of, they're affected and they can really have detrimental effect in a way because they are around making decisions, assessing risk, planning things, organizing things, inhibiting your behavior, which is quite a strenuous activity that when you don't have brain fog, is really quite easy. When you have brain fog, you may just say the wrong thing at the wrong time because you haven't been able to inhibit your behavior. Similarly, irritability, you kind of snap, you reach that point an awful lot sooner. I've mentioned the spatial navigation, which most people would refer to as clumsiness. And then there's the more general just sense of where the fog bit comes from, just a loss of mental clarity and a mental fatigue, which is very different from physical fatigue. I think everybody listening can identify with any of those issues. But the difference with brain fog is we'll have experienced those. It'd be quite common to experience those if you had jet lag, if you had a really late night, or you hadn't slept properly for a few nights, or you were under, there's various times where those things will happen to us. But the difference with brain fog is that it's persistent. It occurs regularly. It interferes with the quality of your life. It interferes with your relationships. It interferes with your work. One thing I actually didn't mention was that your process, what we call processing speed, slows. That means the duration, the amount of time it takes for you to take information in, make sense of it, and formulate a response. If you've always been a really witty individual, first one up with ideas around the boardroom table, or the first person with a quick, funny comment when you're out socializing or whatever, if you've got brain fog and your processing speed is slowed, well, the moment has passed before you think of that funny remark or come up with that idea. And the thing is that other people tend to interpret our behavior in their context as if it is something that they've done or something that's only they are experiencing. So other people can see that, gosh, she wasn't her usual self with me. Normally she's cracking jokes and really witty, but she just seemed a bit distant. Did I do anything on her? Or in work, it might come across that you're actually not putting the effort in. They really can have quite significant impact. So I think that's the kind of key difference I would draw there. And I do think it's important to say as well that brain fog is not a disease. It's not a disorder, and it's not a diagnosis in and of itself. That doesn't mean that it is not real. It's very real. And there's a lot of research being done on it in more recent times, but there has been research done in the past. And basically, I would say that brain fog is a sign that something is amiss. It's a signal to take action. And I often use the analogy of a cough. So a cough is a symptom usually of a cold. You have a cold and a cough, or you have flu and a cough, and you know the cause of your cough, and you wait for your flu or whatever to run its course. But if you get better and your cough persists and it's ongoing and starts to interfere with the quality of your life, you can't get to the end of a sentence without coughing, or you're having coughing fits embarrassingly in a restaurant or whatever, that's kind of a sign that something's amiss and you need to take action. And usually you'll go to your doctor and you'll say, look, I have this persistent cough. And your doctor won't diagnose you with a cough. Your doctor will try to find the underlying cause, and they'll probably carry out a few tests, and they'll try and rule out things. And you may discover that you have developed asthma as a consequence of your infection, or it could be actually gorge. Is it that gastro reflux can cause a cough? So too can certain heart conditions, or it could be an allergy. It could be something new in your workplace that's irritating and causing you to cough. It's really the same in a way with brain fog. It's a sign or a symptom that something is amiss. And I suppose with my book, what I aimed to do in detail is help people to identify what might be amiss, and also to identify what specific domains are affected for them, because we listed all of them. And sometimes you can be unfortunate and experience all of them, but sometimes just one or two are enough to be debilitating.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few in there that I didn't associate with brain fog, like the clumsiness and the spatial awareness. Those are really interesting ones for brain fog.
You see, your
as well.
brain is constantly navigating you through the world in every way. Our brain is so brilliant at doing what it does that it is only when it is struggling that you realize, oh my God, my brain is assessing the distance between me and that doorway so that I go through it without bumping off it. And yeah, if your brain is compromised for whatever reason, yeah, clumsiness can be one of the consequences.
Yeah, that's a really surprising one for me. Now, do we know why people experience brain fog? Do we have sort of a common thread for all of those, or is it a very individual and unique situation for every person?
We know there are multiple factors, and I will go through those. And as I go through them, it will become clear that sometimes we can have more than one factor that contributes, and almost maybe a tipping point is reached and your brain can't cope anymore. Yeah, brain fog can be, and I think it's important, first of all, to kind of go to these ones and rule them out, or you may already have one of the underlying conditions and go, that's why that's affecting me or whatever. But the good news is there are many factors that contribute to brain fog that we can do something about. But first of all, yes, it is associated with multiple health conditions. And rather interestingly, many of these health conditions disproportionately affect women. And I think that's one of the reasons that it has gone under the radar so long, only with long COVID, with so many millions affected of both genders, that it's kind of now sort of seen the light. But yes, a lot of conditions. So a lot of autoimmune conditions. So for example, lupus, Sjogren's, I have Sjogren's, inflammatory diseases, chronic pain, which I know is something that you're interested in, neurological conditions, and migraine is a neurological condition, and that's quite commonly associated with brain fog. And I have migraine also, and that's how I have particular experience with brain fog. Multiple sclerosis would be another neurological condition. Chronic pain, I mentioned chronic pain, so fibromyalgia. In fact, actually, I use brain fog as an umbrella term, a general term, but often with these different conditions, people have their own name for it. So with fibromyalgia, people will tend to say fibrofog. With multiple sclerosis, they often refer to cog fog, as in cognitive function fog. And in fact, interestingly, with multiple sclerosis, when people get a diagnosis, they frequently are concerned about their loss of physical function and worry that that might prevent them from doing their jobs. But actually, the brain fog is their most debilitating and usually the most reason why they may have to actually step back from their jobs. Other chronic conditions, really depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and viral infections. Brain fog is extremely common after sepsis. And I wrote way back in 2020, I did an episode of my own podcast, a very special episode around people very early in the pandemic experiencing brain fog. I didn't have a crystal ball, but it's no surprise to me. The primary function of your brain is to keep you alive. And when that is threatened, it really doesn't matter whether you can make a decision about what clothes to wear. It really doesn't matter if you forget what you had for breakfast. Your brain has to put all of its energies into fighting this life-threatening condition. In addition, then, brain fog can be caused by a side effect of medication. Unfortunately, it can be a side effect of many of the medications used to treat the aforementioned conditions. Essentially, any medication that acts on your central nervous system has the capacity to cause brain fog. Certain antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, medications for those autoimmune diseases, they can contribute. And I have to be very, very clear here. Never stop taking a prescribed medication without consulting your doctor. But if you do suspect that your brain fog is caused by a medication, then speak to your prescribing doctor. There may be an alternative that actually won't impact on you in that way. So that's kind of important to note. But I think a lot of people probably aren't aware that a lot of over-the-counter medications side effect is brain fog. So I'm thinking antihistamines, anti-nausea tablets, pain medications. And in fact, you'll often just read it, oh, may cause drowsiness. And maybe it isn't causing drowsiness, but it actually may be interfering with your ability to focus and pay attention and those kind of things. You might be managing to keep your eyes awake, but you may be having some of the other symptoms. Then another very big and important one, and actually a big driver in why I wrote the book, is hormonal imbalance or fluctuations. One of the reasons I wrote the book was because I felt there was a cohort of women in perimenopause and menopause who were experiencing brain fog as a consequence of the hormonal fluctuations and probably other factors on top of that, who were catastrophizing that they were starting to get dementia. And often at that point in life, looking after elderly parents who perhaps may already have a diagnosis. And I want to make it very clear, brain fog and dementias are very, very different things. Brain fog is temporary and there are plenty of things that you can do about it. And it's not a progressive condition. It's not neurodegenerative. That's really, really important. But PMS, pregnancy brain, menopause, but it's not just those reproductive hormones that influence thyroid dysfunction. If you have, and rather interestingly, I think if you have hyperthyroidism, overactive thyroid, or hypo, underactive, you get different brain fog symptoms. And I suppose type 2 diabetes, insulin is the hormone that's fluctuating there. And then really you can come down to the lifestyle factors. And I think most of these happen in conjunction. And this is my point, that if you can manage the lifestyle factors, your brain may be able to cope with the impact of your hormonal changes or with your autoimmune condition. It's frequently that you have multiple factors And I think that's probably what happened with COVID, that not everybody got brain fog, but some people maybe were living more brain healthy lifestyles beforehand. And so their brain was better able to cope with the challenge, whereas others had multiple factors. And then the COVID was the tipping point. Basically, nutritional or dietary deficiency can bring about brain fog. And your brain depends on what you eat to function. So it really is important. But there's particular deficiencies that can bring about. The first one I'm going to mention, the brain fog actually is so severe, it has often been confused with dementia, and that's vitamin B12 deficiency. An iron deficiency, a lot of women are iron deficient, a folate deficiency, or even just not having enough omega-3 in your diet can impact on your brain function. Now, that doesn't mean, and I just want to say that here, that doesn't mean that you should go out and take these supplements. Only if your doctor says that you have a deficiency, they will then prescribe. So don't go out and spend money on these supplements that are out there aimed at making money off your concerns. And then the lifestyle factors are poor sleep, poorly managed chronic stress, lack of exercise, and lack of mental stimulation. All of those last things are things that we can really do something about and sort of prevent us from getting into that tipping point where it becomes debilitating.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because very often, especially I know in perimenopause, the brain fog makes us afraid that our mental abilities are declining. That's a really good point, that this is a temporary thing that we actually have control over to do some of the changes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you really, really look after your diet, if you really prioritize sleep. And I know that can be difficult if you get into menopause and you've got flushes, but you can also minimize those and minimize the disruption caused by broken sleep. That's what's rather interesting. You have your estrogen. A lot of people wonder, well, why is that happening? But estrogen is changing during menopause, but you have estrogen receptors in your brain. You have estrogen receptors in the parts of your brain involved in memory and in learning. And if those levels change, they're going to impact those brain activities. They're not just involved in your sort of reproductive aspects and activities. And then you see progesterone impacts indirectly, because progesterone is what makes you wake up during the night and breaks your sleep. And then it's the poor sleep that contributes to the brain fog. It's multiple factors, really. And I do think women are disproportionately open to these things. We're all trying to be super women in a way. I was talking to someone the other day, and she was talking about menopause and about how challenging things were. And her mother just saying, oh, for goodness sake, we just all sailed through it. Nobody even talked about it. And she said to me, what is it? Are we wimps? And I went, no, but did your mother work? Did she have a job? Was she expected to be performing at this high-powered level? Was she expected to look gorgeous all the time? Was she expected to be on social media? No, times have changed dramatically that put other stresses on you that maybe our parents didn't experience in the past. And that's not to say that other lifestyle factors aren't interfering with how our hormones fluctuate. That's true too, but it's the big picture that kind of counts. And that's where the solution lies, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes me think about chronic pain also, which is a bit more prevalent in women as well. So the connections between stress and brain fog, chronic pain and brain fog. So there are a lot of things that are all kind of lifestyle related on how we live, how well we manage stress, how well we care for ourselves, and all of that kind of comes together and then brings out this check engine light, as you said, the warning sign of brain fog, that something's not quite lined up for us. So
I remember I have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. My neurologist thinks that the pain I experience in my body is actually really my migraine. It doesn't really matter. They're just names, really. And that's just a way for professionals to communicate about them. But yeah, I mean, I remember reading as well that fibromyalgia is much more common in sort of type A high achievers. And I mean, my husband would have described me as like the Duracell bunny. I don't know if that means anything to you, but you know, that advert where the bunny just keeps going on and on and on because it's got more energy. And I think that's a pattern a lot of people with chronic pain or even ongoing autoimmune conditions have, is that when the good days are good, you just want to do everything. And it is hard to get that balance. I still do that. I have the boom and bust cycle. I get loads done, and then maybe I just get dreadful migraine, dreadful fatigue. and I have to rest. And that's awful in some ways, but I think it's something you can change. Maybe that fatigue is saying to you, hold on a second, you're actually really pushing the boat out too far. I kind of can't cope. And it calls you back again, and you listen to your body and you rest. I mean, I don't have all the answers on that, but I do think that a lot of it is doing too much. And I think there's something rather interesting. And I don't know if you've ever come across this woman, but she would be a fabulous guest. I think Dr. Susan O'Sullivan. And she's wrote a book, which I know if you have chronic pain listeners listening, they will hate the sound of it. But I did a podcast episode with her. And if you just bear with it, it actually makes sense. And basically, she says it's all in your head. That's the kind of thing that makes people scream in a way, it's real. I have pain. I have pain. Yes. And that's the point she's making, though, is that everything that we do originates in our head, in our brain. It's not saying you're imagining things, but your brain is incredibly powerful. And it's so powerful that it can create pain. And I think it's fascinating to understand that. And I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think as well, when it comes to, and this relates to mental health as well, because I remember when I was first kind of ill before I had a diagnosis of the autoimmune and migraine and whatever, that I was going to my doctor with all these symptoms. And on one occasion, she said to me, Sabina, your blood tests are all clear. Now, she said, I wish the rest of my patients were as healthy as you. Go home and enjoy the rest of your life. And I went home and I broke down. And why did she think I was going to the doctor? There's something not right. I'm not functioning. I can't function. I have pain. I can't even put a handbag on my shoulder, only it feels like it's burning into my shoulder. And that was the worst thing, was I really felt I was going insane. And if you have chronic pain listeners or people who have various conditions, that's probably the worst part, is not to be heard. A couple of things there. Maybe our blood tests aren't sensitive enough. Now, further on, I had other blood tests that were more sensitive or whatever. But actually, even at that, they didn't hit the threshold for whatever. I actually had to be subjected to a lip biopsy to prove that I had an autoimmune disease that was attacking my moisture glands, because my bloods didn't exactly fit the profile. My doctor guessed that's what it was because of various different things. Actually, one of those things, funnily enough, was coughing throughout the night. That was obviously dryness in my mouth. But she told me about this. Well, she said, I can't diagnose because your bloods don't, but I'm having these things. And she said, well, the only thing I can do is if you have a biopsy, we can look at your salivary glands. And I read about it and read about people losing function and nerve damage and everything. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And suffered for about another year or so. And then just said, I can't, like, life's not worth living. And I went in and had it. And truth be told, I have no feeling for about an inch on my lip where he damaged my nerves. That's a long time ago now. And I don't really notice it. Occasionally I dribble my food and I make my friends feel very badly. A friend the other day at lunch said to me, oh, you're dribbling there or something like that. And I said, you do know I have no feeling there. And she felt so guilty. There is another aspect to that. So there's the not being believed, our tests not being sensitive enough. But there is an overemphasis on physiological diagnosis. And I think this comes from patients too. So doctors will look for the physiology. That's what they're trained to do. That's their overt indication that there's something there. But there are psychological symptoms. And for some reason, patients and doctors prioritize or create a hierarchy that says physiological symptoms are more important and more real. But the fact of the matter is our brains are incredibly powerful. And so a psychological symptom created by the brain is just as painful as a symptom that's created physiologically. And I think that's where we need to work on, is saying, no, if someone says to you it's psychological, it doesn't mean you're not having pain. It doesn't mean they don't believe you. It means that there's actually something in your processing that's producing pain or heightening your awareness to pain or whatever. And that's why this woman, Susan, her writing, and if anyone wants to listen, if they find the episode, I was talking about a different book of hers, but we did get onto this topic about how that actually can be even better than a physiological diagnosis, because you can start to unpick where and what factors are contributing to it and kind of move away from it. Sorry, we kind of sort of sidetracked a bit, but I think it's something that it interests me, and I think you're interested in chronic pain also.
Absolutely. And these are really important things that also apply to brain fog and our mental health, because many of those don't show up in any tests. We have these things that we're experiencing, but there might not be anything physically that we can test for or even show to get treatment for anything. So yeah, this is a very, very important point. Now, I like the fact that we can do something about brain fog in many, many cases. It is difficult for people to get a diagnosis for brain fog because, like you said, it's a symptom. So we can't really get a diagnosis for brain fog in itself. But we do know that it might be a sign that there's something else going on, that we are too stressed, we're taking on too much. We might want to re-examine our lifestyle choices and maybe work on chronic pain if we are experiencing that. So there are many different pieces that come together with brain fog. As we wrap up today's special episode, do you have resources that listeners can take a look at? You've mentioned your book, and I know that you have a podcast as well called Super Brain. Are there any other resources where our listeners could go to find more on what we talked about in today's episode?
So there is my book, Beating Brain Fog. There's another book that I have, which is called 100 Days to a Younger Brain. And that's really encompassing all of brain fog. I have a little thing because I was very aware when I was writing my book, Brain Fog, that focusing on a book might be very challenging. So I did try and keep it as easy to access as possible. But I also recently produced a set of cards. It's a brain gym in a box. And basically you pick a card. They're beautifully illustrated. And you pick a card and it just gives you one thing that you can do today that's good for your brain health and just explains the science behind it. That's kind of quite easy and straightforward. If people want to go on to superbrain.ie, that actually links through to my books and free resources that are available on websites. So if you go to my YouTube channel, I have tons of little animations that explain things about how your brain works, what's neuroplasticity, why exercise is good for your brain, lots of those things. If you Google my name, lots of things will come up and resources, etc. And I'm sure you'll share links in the show notes as well.
Yes, absolutely. We are going to be linking to all of those resources that you mentioned in the show notes. We will also link to your podcast and the books that you mentioned. And I love the cards that you mentioned. That is really amazing, the brain gym. So yeah, that sounds wonderful. I just want to thank you again for spending this time with us today and coming on and talking about brain fog and sharing all this wisdom that you have around this topic. I feel like it has been such an enlightening and informative conversation and also entertaining. So I think we've managed our goal today. So thank you so very much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much. Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Just one more thing to leave people with. Often kind of if we have chronic pain or mental health issues or are feeling depressed or whatever, we forget to have fun. And it's really one of the most important things to do is, when's the last time you scheduled an hour for just fun? Laughter and smiling, particularly if you don't feel like doing it, they really are the best medicine. And that is scientifically founded. They release endorphins. When you smile, serotonin is released. When you laugh, your reward and pleasure systems in your brain are activated and you get a boost, but also you get a boost in your immune function and your blood pressure is lowered. And this is just a natural resource that your brain has given you that you can choose to use anytime you want. You don't need to have something to smile, because the research shows even if you bite on a pencil and make that shape, it releases all those physiological responses. So yeah, smile, laugh, have fun, schedule time for enjoyment. You've only got one life and enjoy as much of it as you can.
Amazing. Thank you for leaving us with that, which nobody can see that, but I am smiling. So yeah, and we're going to leave listeners with that. And thank you so very much and take care of yourself. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.